What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Look at this lovely face I have with me this time around. It is Haleigh Foutch. How are you doing, Haleigh?
I'm good. I'm excited to hang out and chat some Wandas and some visions. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. We have a good group with us, too. MK Songbird kicking off the live chat. Christy's here. Annibal's here. And Annabelle also already has a super chat in the house. Just saying hello to the best duo in existence. Been a fun ride with this one. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Just a little housekeeping up top here. The reason why we are doing this on my channel is because Witching Hour will no longer be on the Collider Extras channel. And as we figure out what the next steps are for the show, we are going to pop onto this channel together to talk about whatever we want, whenever we want. So keep an eye on this one right here for more with the Witching Hour duo.
That's
so there
right.
you go. That is the update. We cannot help but hang out with each other a lot and talk about a lot of movies and TV shows. So it's only natural for the conversations to continue.
Especially something like the Wandavision finale. We're having this chat and we have a lot to chat about.
It was very, very necessary. We did review. I think, did we review maybe not every single episode, or did we do every single episode in the end?
I don't think we did every single. I think we started like a little bit later, maybe. I don't know, Perri.
I think we started with episode 1 and then maybe missed like 2 or 3, and then something big happened and we jumped back in and stuck with it.
Oh, I think you're right, because we got to the point where we no longer had screeners, so we were as surprised as everyone else.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's probably what had happened now that you say it. So, what is going to happen right now is, as you can tell by the title of this video, it's going to be a season finale review of WandaVision and also an overall season review. So just in case you have not watched the entirety of WandaVision, this video is not for you just yet.
Yeah.
You know what to do. You just push pause, you go watch your stuff, and then when you come back, you press play and you can pick up right here and join us for the conversation. But this right now is your one and only spoiler warning. So do not spoil the show for yourself. Go watch it first and then come have a conversation with us. So I was thinking the best place to start might just be some general season overview thoughts. So how are you feeling about the very first TV series in the MCU?
I think it's really interesting because, you know, it wasn't supposed to be their first one and it wasn't supposed to kick off the new phase. And we'll probably get into that like shaped expectations for it. My overall is I really like it. I do still, having seen it all come together, and I did go back and watch the whole thing all the way through yesterday. I still have some issues, but overall I really like it. And I think what it succeeds at is what it needs to, which is everything to do with Wanda and Vision in the title. The rest, sort of the more side theory MCU world building stuff, as we all know, I've had a little issue with. But overall, I thought the components of Wanda and Vision's relationship came together really well. And having only been in so few scenes in the previous films, it was very satisfying to spend this time with them and see that character development for them.
I'm just realizing all anyone can see out there is the word nominate on my shirt, and that might raise some questions. So just wondering, this is the wardrobe choice for the day. Very much stand by it. I want him to get that nominated.
I'm so happy to see that you like immediately bought from Super Yaki.
Yeah, I absolutely had to, especially when this shirt in particular popped up, because again, I feel very strongly about that happening.
Yes, but also nominate Elizabeth Olsen, you cowards.
Yeah,
for that.
Can they make one of those? Because I would buy that too. Right. Back to WandaVision. I guess I kind of share a very similar set of feelings as you do, Haleigh. Actually, I might be a little more enthusiastic just because I'm just obsessed with movies and shows, but in particular franchises that take really big swings, because I know it's the cliche and almost like dull thing to talk about at this point, but the concept of superhero fatigue, or, you know, fill in the blank fatigue. I know we're sick of hearing about it, and it may, make you roll your eyes, but the truth of the matter is it's something that really could happen if you keep delivering the same type of thing within a property over and over and over again. I feel like it's only natural for some out there, at least, to grow tired of it. So I've always admired the MCU in recent years for some of the big swings that they've taken, and for the fact that when they bring in creators and directors in particular, they do lean into their voices and what makes them different storytellers and creators. And I mean, this right here, WandaVision is the definition of a big swing. Format-wise, where we're viewing the product, everything. The fact that they've prioritized the development of characters that we don't spend a lot of time with in the films over big action set pieces. Those are all unique risks for this franchise to take. And I think almost all of those risks worked out for the better and really made this show stand out and feel like something special. So I really can't applaud that enough. Elizabeth Olsen's performance, yes, I really do think at this point in time, without having seen the rest of the things that will be in competition, it feels Emmy worthy to me. So I'm definitely rooting for her. And yeah, I think I'm torn on some of the things that didn't really work for me, because I'm having, maybe more so with this show than a lot of other things I've watched recently, I'm having a very difficult time separating my hopes and expectations from my feelings about the quality of the material that we got in the show. And, I think that comes with the territory when you create a franchise that doesn't just become, I don't know, yearly or monthly or whatever viewing for you. Like, it becomes a real part of pop culture and also your life. So it was kind of inevitable here. But overall, I love the show and have had an absolute blast covering it from week to week.
Oh, I can't disagree with that last part. But I think it's interesting, the idea of how the franchise plays into our lives and how this show was received and how the theories got so far ahead of themselves in a certain way. Like, I feel like every week there was a new crazy idea, like Al Pacino is going to be Mephisto. And people really got themselves hyped up over that. And to a certain extent, it is a reflection of how fandom processes new things these days. But I also, like, the show built it in. The casting of Evan Peters in that role is very much, it's intentional. It triggers certain things. The part where Jimmy Woo has the board with all the theories, they knew we were going to respond like this. They built that type of conversation into the structure of the show. So I do think it's a fair criticism of the show in itself and not just a comment on fandom.
Yeah, I mean that comment less about things like, will we get Mephisto? And more so about things like Evan Peters' appearance in the show. Because making certain, I think I said this when he first popped up, or at least when we started to doubt who he really was. When you do that and you purposefully open the door to that kind of questioning and those kinds of theorizing, that is very much, in the group of things that can fairly be criticized about the show itself. Yeah, I didn't really have that much of a problem with all the theorizing that went on elsewhere, because in that sense, I was able to do what we do with almost every single movie and show we cover at this point that's attached to a bigger property, is have fun with the theorizing, but know that it might not pan out the way that I want it to. And that's not something to judge the show on.
No, I agree. It might be something to judge the Marvel business model on, in that a lot of it is predicated on keeping secrets, making people guess, making people wonder. But the show itself is not responsible for that.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to get into some specifics here? Where do you want to start?
I want to start with Evan Peters.
Okay, that's fair.
And I came around to the belief that it was not Quicksilver and that it was just a ruse quite a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that helped me accept, with a very hearty laugh, the Ralph Boner thing. Like, I thought that was genuinely funny. Okay. And I understand that it feels like a troll, and it kind of is, but I cannot deny that I cracked up at like 1 a.m. just laughing my goofy little ass off.
I kind of fell right in the middle on it. When that was the reveal, it was just so ridiculous that I don't know. I had to get a decent laugh out of it, and yeah, it did feel like a troll tactic done with purpose. And whether it's in relation to the movies that we love or everyday life, sometimes you have to laugh at yourself when you get super intense about these theories and think everything is connected and there's the multiverse and all this stuff. Sometimes you kind of just gotta laugh when it doesn't pan out the way you want, and all those expectations that you had didn't necessarily fall in line in a show. So I was okay with it, but admittedly, a little piece of me felt like I had just been manipulated, and I didn't like that.
I think that is one of my biggest critiques of the show overall, is that it is very manipulative in its construction to make you feel, and I mean, that's art to a certain extent, but that's a very pointed example is what they did with that character. They absolutely wanted us to be thinking and asking the things that we were. There's no denying that. That is I mean, trolling sounds so mean, but it really was.
Well, I think that kind of manipulation and the other manipulation that speaks to art a little more are two different things, because the Evan Peters manipulation is blurring the lines between the reality of the show and our own reality and who we've been as fans. So I think that's the reason why that didn't sit right. But some of the other things that maybe you could say are emotional manipulation are confined to the world of the MCU itself, and they're also well woven into the story and well woven into the build of the story and Wanda's arc overall. So those felt far more naturally digestible to me. That other one I could not separate from my own reality.
Yeah. I'm curious, what do you think about the folks who are still clinging to some hope that it's actually him? Or not think about the people who think about that. Think about the idea of it.
It seems highly unlikely to me at this point. I don't think that's the case, but I'm going to backtrack a little, because as I was just explaining that, like, isn't that reaction that I just laid out with Evan Peters' character essentially mirroring what Wanda had been through growing up with sitcoms?
I see.
It is kind of the same thing, where if I created a hex of my own and I wanted to live in a certain series, would I have created that particular show and movie to suit the things that I loved most about it or wanted the most from it?
I mean, yeah, I guess it falls down to two different things, which are like narrative purpose and audience manipulation, both of which one can be solid and the other can be a little weak sauce.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they had cast that role either with Aaron Taylor Johnson or just another actor, I think it would have played a lot differently.
Yeah, I was thinking about that while watching it, how I might have reacted if it was Aaron Taylor Johnson, and that would have felt a little more in line with what I'm saying about, naturally having that kind of manipulation part of the story. But it was
so I'm a little confused on how he had super speed powers from, like, the way she explained how hard magic is. It's a stretch for me that it just doesn't quite add up in my head.
Which I think that's a pretty fair question mark right there. I think the reason the show gets away with it is because, the idea of chaos magic is, I guess it's chaotic and unwieldy, and it's not necessarily something you could narrow down to a list of, abilities and not abilities, or like wherever those abilities end. And I never really got a full picture of Agatha's power set, and then which I think is done with purpose, and then also Wanda's power set, which again is also done with great purpose. So you know me, usually I'm busy like writing out a logic and rule book. Yeah. I actually thought that the show got away with not explaining away everybody's abilities fairly well.
I agree in general, except that they didn't really fully explain Agatha's powers, but she did make it very clear that it's hard to pull off even the smallest illusion. So that is a stretch for me that I'll be thinking about for a while.
All right, I hear you. That's very fair. Where are we now? What do we want to do?
I immediately went straight to the Ralph Boner issue. So
Ralph Boner.
Yeah.
Ralph Boner. Dick jokes in the MCU. Who's like the most natural character? I guess if we like want to start small and go big, what about Darcy in this final episode?
So that feels to me a complication of, again, outside forces, and that it seems like a COVID decision, and it sucks for the show, but I get it.
Yeah. I thought it played very well given that fact, given I knew that that's probably what happened here. It was a nice little button for her. So she has some sense of closure given what she was doing in the show, but that's the tough thing when you're a TV show, I guess now, or a movie in the MCU, and you have multiple characters who are, well known, and you want to see more from them. You only have so much screen time to do every single character justice. And I would say Darcy, Jimmy Woo, even Monica to some extent fell by the wayside and definitely didn't feel like they got full stories, but Wanda did. And if that's the top priority of the show, I understand why she was prioritized over them. But it definitely felt like they just had to find a way to throw Darcy in, and that's what they were able to accomplish given the circumstances.
There's to a certain extent, you're like, how did it take her so long to get to that part of town? I don't think it's a very big deal. You just have to go like, what they did, it was COVID, nothing's okay. They did a good job working around that. And it was a very funny send-off line for Darcy.
Yeah. I have another COVID production related question. Do you think that a good deal of that end set piece, the fight between Wanda and Agatha, was designed because of COVID that way?
I can't tell. I think maybe because as much as it is a sort of stereotypical MCU third act big brawl situation, I don't think it plays as well or as interesting. And I wonder if that's because the shot composition had to be different.
It was a little strange. I think they did a good job right at the beginning of all that to just, set up that Agatha was up here and Wanda was going to play it closer to the ground for the most part, at least. Mm-hmm. But especially when we got to the town center and Agatha was just chilling by the billboard, that was the moment where I'm like, why are you up there?
Yeah, why are you so far away?
Why are you up there from a character perspective? And also, why are you up there? Because that shot does not look as good as when they're in closer proximity with each other.
Yeah, from a character perspective, it's always good to have the high ground, I guess. But from a shot composition perspective, it didn't, the action scenes just didn't feel as lively to me as they usually do. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of the stereotypical third act Marvel set piece. Fair criticism. I just happen to always enjoy them. Except this one didn't really land for me.
That's kind of what matters. It landed for me most of all when they did the reveal with the runes. I like that because I mean that just plays into Wanda's larger story too, and just the whole idea of do you or don't you have a mentor? What are you picking up new information from, and how that could be dangerous? And that was it was a nice callback. It was a very effective callback that made me go, huh. And kind of reaction, especially when it's within the craziness of a big CGI heavy action sequence.
And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because I do think there's more to say about Agatha Harkness, but I did like that the two parts of the big final battles that really worked for me were moments of intelligence from both Vision, especially obviously the logic off is wonderful, but also Wanda, she won by being clever, not by being the most powerful.
Yeah. I am with you on those points. So wait, we're not
really a really good way to make the most of what was probably a COVID set. Is what if we the character really smart?
Yeah. I have a feeling that's the case there. So before we get to Agatha, maybe sticking with some of the smaller characters, how did you feel about how Jimmy Woo was used throughout the show and then in the end?
I pretty much loved that. I think that's a really nicely executed supporting role. There was nothing built, unlike Monica, let's say, there was nothing built into his role that I felt demanded more than what we got. I may have wanted it because I love every time he's on screen, but I think that for the purposes of the character, totally fine. Also, like in terms of a great final episode line, flourish, yay.
Yeah, I like that beat. The only beat for him in this final episode that didn't quite sit right is when Wanda is opening the hex and Hayward and his team get in, but Jimmy kind of gets stopped just short. I don't know. It felt like a very deliberate move to make sure certain sets of characters weren't together at a certain point.
Yes.
I actually think it might have played a little better for me had he ran up real close and almost got through the hex and then it closed in his face. But instead, like he's at a very safe distance away from it and also doesn't have like a huge sense of urgency on his face. He's not conveying that urgency to run towards it while it's open.
I think it just might be one of those things that we've talked about, like when you have only so much time.
Yeah.
That I think that put them in a corner to take the easiest writing shortcut, and that's not always the best writing, but it is what it is.
Yeah, you're probably right on that.
And I really, we probably never will because Marvel is so secretive, but boy, would I love to see like a pre-COVID draft of the script and then what it ended up being, to see how, like, if it significantly changed as much as we think it did.
I'd be so curious to see that, and it's never happening. No. All right, the next of the smaller characters, Hayward.
Fuck that guy. What? No, that is the one thing in the show that 100% doesn't work for me. What an expendable, unnecessary, unlikable, unsurprising, predictable character.
You're right. The only thing I wound up kind of finding interesting about the character was like the similarities but opposing approaches to them both wanting Vision back, where Hayward's kind of, driven by power within that organization and Wanda is purely coming from an emotional place, but they're both doing bad things in order to like force the reexistence, reemergence, recreation, whatever word you want to choose to bring back Vision in two very different ways. And there's part of me that thinks that seeing both of those operate in the tail end of the season wound up enhancing one another in ways that didn't feel super overt, but more subtle to me. But still, Hayward as a character was, as thin and cookie cutter as they come. So as far as his journey in the show goes, like I've seen it before. I'm okay with how his agenda might have served Wanda a little better, but I did not care much for him as an individual at all.
I guess the reason why it kind of irks me more than other things is because of the time constraints of the show. Not that maybe you do need him for the reasons you mentioned, which I really like as a read on why he was there, but he sure took up a lot of screen time.
He did. Yeah, he got more time that I think might have been better served with, Monica getting more time in the spotlight.
Yeah, I think so. But overall, that side of things, though I don't think it was, perfectly balanced to the more interesting stuff happening inside the hex. I would never say, like, I wish that wasn't in the show, because I loved that trio of Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy so much. And it was such a pleasure of the entire series.
I very much liked them as well. So I guess the next one to move on to is probably Monica.
That makes sense.
I just think Tiana Paris is great. And even though I think that character didn't get the screen time she needed in this particular show, I'm excited for what they set up. And I'm just also excited for what it says about Tiana Paris's ability to command the screen, because when you could take a little bit of screen time like that and still have huge presence, that just speaks to someone's talent, ability, and range. And I think this season of the show, like, what's the deal with the future of the show? We'll get to that. But as far as one season of television goes, I think for Tiana Paris and the character of Monica in particular, it basically just confirms that we have a great new addition to the MCU who is going to have a lot to offer to all the other properties that she winds up being attached to.
Something else I've been thinking about regarding Monica is like, I've really come around to loving, like really loving this as the way that she gets her powers. I think it's such an interesting twist on that power set. And I guess what really excites me about it, and it's weird that it happens after the conclusion of, the so-called Infinity Saga, but it's like another extension of the power of those stones and how it can change the entire universe through these secondary connections. I think it's one of the most interesting things we've seen about the stones. And I think it's really funny that it comes now as opposed to before the big stone off.
I do like that.
And same with the vision thing, you are the part of the power stone or whatever, the infinity stone that lives in me. I don't remember the exact line, but such a fascinating expansion of that mythology, which I really appreciate having spent 10 years with that mythology.
Yeah, I've appreciated the ways that WandaVision has echoed things that's happened in the past MCU installments, it's happening right now, and that will continue to happen in the future. I think that just makes the larger world richer, in addition to just being interesting bits in this particular show.
And I suppose that I wanted more for her in this show, but I also understand that it existed as a setup for that character to go have her next adventure. And I can't say that having seen her in the show did not appropriately make me very excited. It totally did. They got me where they wanted me. I'm so ready to see Captain Marvel 2 now.
So I assume you liked her end credit scene.
Yes, of course. Very interesting. In terms of, my comic fandom was as if... This is why I'm always like, I kind of know things, but not as much as I probably should. I read comics very intensely for a period in my life, but haven't in a while. And the Skrulls were never really my focus of interest. So that's exciting in a way of like, I really don't know where this is going to go. And I'm very excited to find out.
Yeah, I'm eager to see what happens next too, and what happens in what films, because is she attached to more than one? Like, it's not, we don't necessarily know for sure, I guess, but I don't know. The whole idea of her going up has a whole lot of possibilities attached to it. And I'm assuming that you're with, I guess, the large majority out there thinking that the individual that the Skrull was referring to is Nick Fury, right?
I mean, it seems like the most applicable. And after a season of us trying to out-theorize Marvel when they ultimately ended up doing like mostly what we expected in the first place, probably yes.
Yeah. It is weird to think about that back at the very beginning. I mean, other than like some of, or at least my big out there theories, like my big Loki theory that didn't pan out whatsoever. A lot of the little things, or the stuff that we picked up on early on really did pan out. It's like I should have just stuck with the idea that Wanda is really doing this whole thing. Why didn't I just hold tight to that?
Right. Yeah, so I don't want to out ponder myself on that. I think probably yes, that seems most likely.
All right, I guess there's no point in breaking out the kids on their own, so we're kind of up to the big trio now. Is there, how much more do we want to, I mean, we barely even scratched the surface of Agatha. As a little thing though, I will say, I think the shot that I adored the most was her empty boots in the house under the car.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like, we've made the Wizard of Oz reference before, but the second that visual came up, there was an audible like, like I looked and I shouted at the screen. I appreciated that touch quite a bit.
As as a witch enthusiast myself, I did appreciate a lot of the touches throughout the series to reference the iconography of witchcraft on screen and such. I loved the black witch fingers that she had at the end. Yeah. So for her, I had said last week that I thought maybe she would turn into more of an ally. I still think that's probably the direction, just not yet.
Yeah. I've read a couple things about that because I was trying to learn a little more about their relationship in the comics, and it it does seem likely. And also, when the MCU does something along the lines of staying, like this character, you stay here until we can come back to you.
That's
That is
now we know
exactly
it's
what
right.
happened, right? Where I would feel comfortable saying we will definitely see the return of Agatha, and the only good reason I could see them going back to her is if Wanda needs her to answer questions. So probably not the best mentor to have, especially when all of your knowledge is coming from someone who, I don't know, maybe had the capacity for good, but clearly never acted on it. And her coven in that one scene was just like, no, you don't. So she's learning from someone who, from my perspective, is pretty evil. And then she's got the dark hold, and all of her sources of information are evil and dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think like Wanda's about to have a real awesome time. Not that she ever has.
I
That's part of
know.
the character's whole thing, though. The whole forged, like she is made the Scarlet Witch because of these consistent tragedies that happen to her. But no, I think absolutely, like she's getting information from all the wrong places when and if she can get it, because nobody knows what the heck she is, and the only person who does was a villain who like tried to take all her power away.
You know what I'm just remembering? I was rewatching the episode last night with my mom, who did watch the whole season, and at the end of the show, goes, "Oh, that was a happy ending."
Oh.
Then she just harped on the fact that Wanda was very nice. I think my mom just really appreciated that she gave a sincere apology at the end. And also, when you don't know certain elements within the comics and what they're capable of, and also just the nature of the MCU and I guess what's happening around Wanda, it's like maybe the whole thing felt like a step in the right direction if you don't know her past. But like she did know learn her past in episode 8. I don't know. I'm just like surprised to hear that.
I guess it kind of is. I mean, compared to the last time they said goodbye, it's definitely a happier ending.
No, it's true. Like the nature of that goodbye, where we've said goodbye before, which would basically confirm that they're gonna, like she said, say hello again, if not say goodbye again. I hope that doesn't happen. Probably will. But I feel like there's tinges of both. But I think I wind up thinking more about the more sinister and upsetting elements just because I've seen her go so deep in that territory before, and just knowing what she's capable of so much. It's just I get like, even though I had that brief moment of relief and I could feel the weight lifting off of her, like then she just gets crushed all over again.
Where did your mom end up liking the show overall?
I think she did. She says she did. It's interesting watching one installment of the MCU alongside someone who has I don't think watched any of it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that alone was an interesting experience, but I think this is part of the reason again why I'm really excited to see a show take a big swing. The entry point for my mom was the sitcom element of it all. Was the structural and visual creative swing they took with that. And by doing that, they brought in a viewer who has never seen any MCU thing before. And that is another reason why I think we need to, keep telling stories with unique designs from different perspectives, from underrepresented perspectives, and then the MCU fandom will just keep growing and growing.
Yeah, and hopefully, by bringing in people with these bigger swings, you open the door to even more big swings, because it's like the weirdest we got brought in maybe, some of the biggest amounts of new audience. And of course, some of that's due to the platform.
Yeah.
But my hope is just like Guardians allowed them to push further into the weirdness of the cosmic world, that this show will open the doors a bit more on streaming as well.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. Is there anything we want to add about Agatha before moving over to Vision?
Yeah, nope. Just I'm pretty confident we'll see her again, and I'm excited for it because why would you want a one and done with Catherine Hahn? Please.
Also, we know the power of fandom and social media. Agatha got one of the biggest responses out there. I mean, the amount of videos on TikTok I'm seeing with Agatha all along playing in the background is just the greatest thing ever.
I mean, it's been stuck in everyone's head for almost a month. And that's obviously a credit to the songwriters as well, but very much also because of how much we fell for Catherine Hahn's performance.
You can also bet that if we have a normal or semi-normal Halloween this year, that there are going to be so many costumes from this show, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of Agathas in particular.
I was thinking about this and last night, looking at all the different costumes, which I think that work was just phenomenal throughout the show. And it's really cool. Usually when there's a new hot Halloween costume for the year, it's like everyone wearing the same one, but there are like 25 Scarlet Witch costumes you can do from that.
I know.
That's so cool.
I
new costume rule.
They're like all those looks. Like if I were to pick a look, I wouldn't know what to pick, but I would probably settle on comfy sweatshirt and sweatpant Wanda because that is where I feel like I'm in my natural state. So I essentially just picked the most boring costume out there.
I would probably go a firm 80s for those very reasons. And also you can just have puffy hair and it's great. But I love the new costume they ended up with at the end. I think it is so beautiful and strong and striking. I just think beautiful. Love it so much.
I feel like the reveal and the build to it made it even better too. That it wasn't just a costume a character is wearing for the sake of having a cool costume. It really meant something and it had value when it was revealed. Yeah. So Vision. Poor Vision. I mean, poor Vision, but not poor Vision because of the speech he gives at the end and the positive spin he has on the fact that he comes back in different forms.
This is what really worked for me in this episode is all things Vision. I just love how they handled it. The logic off is the most Vision thing ever. I'm so glad something like that finally made it into the MCU where I've made no secret my feelings that I think they have not embraced the full extent of his wisdom, ability, power, and charms in his robot genius, god creature, hybrid man way. I love that character. And that was one of the first things where I was like, yes, that's Vision.
Well, didn't he have some sort of intellectual conversation with Ultron? I haven't rewatched that movie in forever. I can't fully remember.
So Ultron has a lot of flaws, but I do think it's the movie that most got Vision right until now.
Okay. I thought I remembered that happening. But yeah, I liked that scene. I like that scene quite a bit. I love when all the, and I do, I'm with you, Haleigh. I love those big, wild third act set pieces with tons of CG. I fall for them every single time. But here in particular, especially with what they had done with the show in every other episode prior, I feel like it was such a smart move to have those take a beat moments and really talk something through and talk it through in a way that well reflected both characters and what they've experienced. So I was very, very into that. And I think Paul Bettany just got the best dialogue all season.
He really did. And he didn't waste it.
That his lines in WandaVision are the types of lines that maybe I'm just speaking about myself. Not that I necessarily have plans to do this, but those are the kinds of lines that people write down and get tattoos of. So you never forget them and you live by them.
That's so funny. There will be a whole bunch of what is love or what is grief, but love persevering tattoos. That's right.
Yeah. And it's an all-timer kind of line of dialogue there.
Well, it's also sort of like the thesis of this show. Yeah. And I thought that it came together really beautifully in their final scene together, which totally worked for me.
So hard to watch.
Cry. So much crying from me. You know, I'm an easy crier. But this was the first one I actually watched right when it went live at midnight. And so I was like, I don't need to be crying this much this late.
Oh, wow.
I'm glad I did because it was beautiful.
I cannot stay up until 3 a.m. on the East Coast. So that's never been an option for me. Well, I go to bed like a grandma in general. So when I say I can't stay up until 3 a.m., I can't stay up until midnight anymore either.
That was very, very rare. The only reason I did it was I was like, oh, wow, I'm still awake. Might as well.
But that scene was especially beautiful. And it's just another thing that highlights the quality of performances we got on the show. And I also think those kids are great.
Mhm.
The more emotional beat was the one with Wanda and Vision alone, but the step up you got from that scene with the kids, I think as a sequence played very well and had a very effective build to it. And I was thinking in that moment also because, you know, when you add up the amount of screen time they had, we didn't really get to know them as like we don't really get to know them as a family in the same way we do families in other things. Like so much of their life as we've experienced it, and I guess as they've experienced it too, maybe in a sense, has been fast forwarded.
Yes.
So it should feel slight, but the relationships and the connections and the love that they have for one another still feel so true and feel like they have so much history behind it. And the fact that they were able to pull that off so well, I mean, I guess it comes from the script also, but I think that is largely due to the chemistry and the talent between that group of actors.
I think that's a huge factor. And of course, yes, the scripting, which I think in terms of the feats that the show did a phenomenal job of, it's exactly what you just said, making us care about that family unit with so little time spent with them, especially with the kids.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that? Thanks for choosing me as your mom line. That's very interesting.
Yeah. both times I watched the episode, I stopped and I'm like, that's an interesting choice of words.
Isn't it though?
I don't have a reasonable theory. I do think it was meant very literally.
Yes. I guess my working theory, because the pregnancy appeared to be a surprise to Wanda when it happens, is that maybe wasn't part of her initial setup, and that somebody, like maybe those arrived to her via another sort of how Pietro wasn't her doing, it was Agnes's. I'm a little curious if those little sweethearts arrived by way of someone else, because that's such a specific line of dialogue.
By way of who?
Well, like there are comic theories that would, you know, everyone thought it was Mephisto because of those tie-ins.
Okay.
But it just, I don't, without it meaning something, I truly don't understand that line of dialogue.
Okay.
I don't get it.
Yeah. It feels like you can get into dangerous territory with that kind of scenario. So and like, again, without knowing a lot about the, the comic lore that's supporting that, I can't figure out a logical, meaningful way to have that happen to Wanda and then make it justifiable in the end. But again, that's coming from someone who doesn't know much about what's happened in the comics. So I just have so little to work with here.
Well, we also have that post credits of her hearing them calling out.
Yeah.
What I'm guessing is the multiverse. So I assume their story is not finished and that we'll probably learn more about those sweet little weird creatures.
We might as well just go into Wanda now, because we gotta touch on that end credit scene. But first, Danny Sanchez is here. Hello, and how you doing, my friend?
Hey.
Love you. Keep up the amazing work. I appreciate it. I appreciate your super chat and for you being here and supporting the channel. So thank you.
I also love you, Perri, and I also think you should keep up with it.
I love the sound of that. We will be talking. We got plans. All right. I guess I kind of just want to like talk about that end scene now. I'm glad they did too. I'm very glad they did too. And I'm very glad that this is the one. I think it was important for them to have included this in WandaVision in particular, rather than having ended Wanda's story where it ended. It speaks to what we were talking about a little earlier about the fact that when you're as big of a franchise as the MCU and you do get the theory wheels turning in people's heads and you keep them going in between releases, it almost feels like to me, and no, the MCU does not owe me anything, but it does feel like they owe me a little bit of a stepping stone so we don't get completely out of control in that middle ground, especially when it's not just a matter of waiting from WandaVision to Falcon and Winter Soldier to get more answers. We're waiting until Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Or is it maybe Spider-Man No Way Home?
I don't think so, because the original lineup wasn't Spider-Man first, then WandaVision, and then Doctor Strange 2 was supposed to come really soon after WandaVision.
Yeah. See, this is why I'm having a difficult time also formulating theories, because there has been an unexpected shuffle going on right now, and it's creating a little bit of confusion in terms of timeline. But I do feel like we needed something to be able to chew on that bridges the gap between this and that, especially because, yes, without that scene, you could very much read this as a happy ending where Wanda is going off into the world looking to learn about her powers, but in an effort to do only good with them. Whereas now we at least have a sense that there's something more sinister and darker a brewing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a really good post-credit scene, and I'm kind of just echoing you, but in that it doesn't just foment curiosity about what's next. I actually think it's an essential sort of exclamation point of sorts on the end of this journey for her. Like it wasn't just she learned to process grief a little bit better. It's also that she's been introduced to some really powerful stuff she doesn't quite understand, but is going to try to. We don't know what effect it'll have on her, but it's not like, it feels at the same time as it's teasing another chapter, it feels an essential part of closing this chapter too to me. Yeah. Also, it just looks cool as hell.
Oh, it did. It did. I mean, even the shot or the sequence of shots we got getting to the porch with her sitting on it, just that whole thing was done extremely well.
And of course, there was that very sort of provocative, interesting line from Agatha that she is stronger than the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yes.
That post-credit scene is a callback to, we saw Doctor Strange do something very similar when he was studying while asleep. But I couldn't remember the exact visual of that. And I looked back and he's really just kind of reading. Like, he's not doing this whole 7-handed fancy maneuver that she's doing while she's astral projecting.
Yeah, so it's basically that, like that, but 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. Or 7. She was really all up in that magic. And this show didn't, I guess, probably because they assume most folks have seen Doctor Strange, but like, magic comes from pulling from other dimensions in this world. So I thought that was a nice visual representation of something that was not so explicitly said in this show.
Yeah, I think that definitely worked well. The only thing that, has me maybe a little worried is the idea of watching Wanda, I guess, recover in a sense or get to a better place only to slip again, because we've seen that happen a couple of times now. And I mean, it's human nature. Like, we make the same damn mistakes over and over again. I learned that lesson when I was a teeny tiny child watching Jurassic Park, and how that franchise has evolved, where the same people make the same mistakes over and over. I know it happens, and it is true to life in many ways. It's just, it's difficult to keep doing something like that on screen without it feeling like a retread or growing tired, or with an audience member just kind of throwing up their hands and saying, "Oh, learn your lesson already," kind of thing. I really do believe that they've evolved that with Wanda in a way that can support another go around with it. I'm just saying that by having her take a step back again, it's just a very challenging thing to pull off in a fulfilling manner. But I have faith that they'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It is, but again, that is kind of the characters. This is just tragedy after tragedy leads to new sort of outbursts of her power that she doesn't quite control. And it'll be interesting to see when she learns about it, how much she can control it, what, having learned only from this one book literally called the Darkhold. That doesn't sound good, and it's not. How that affects her. Uh, I I'm curious. I don't think it makes sense for her to be a straight up villain in Doctor Strange 2, but I imagine that they're probably not going to get along like gangbusters from the get go. I don't, maybe there might be more antagonisty leading up into, because I mean, they said basically you're going to destroy the world. Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty much out there now.
I wonder if it's going to be more of a situation where, you know, we've been talking about the value of mentors and how she'll have to turn back to Agatha at some point. Maybe the relationship between her and Doctor Strange winds up being, you know, they don't get along at the beginning, but she comes to learn that he can help her harness the power and they'll end up in a happy place.
Well, because the difference is, like, she has more raw power. He knows so much more about how to use his.
Yeah. Yeah, that's seems to be the resource that she needs. Here's a good question from Blackhawk. Will Wanda ever love again? And this brings up the question of what is the future of the White Vision? Will they come into contact, and will that then take the place of the prior vision?
Right. I know a lot of people were like, wow, he straight up bailed, but it makes sense to me given that, like, he just got the memories, but not necessarily the emotions.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, myself included, were hoping that the two visions would be fused into something resembling. But I know there's a lot of stories out there for, like, White Vision or Faux Vision or Fission or whatever you want to call them to be explored in the meantime. I think that they will. I mean, they teed it up pretty well, right? Like, we'll probably say hello again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I look forward to that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the popular guess, and the one I'd have to agree with as well, is that he probably went to Wakanda because that's his last memory and it's a pretty disturbing one.
That's a really good question that I'm surprised that I haven't put a lot of thought into.
That would be my guess. And that would make sense maybe about how they could sort of semi-restore Vision, because Shuri was working on that, didn't get to finish it, mapping his mind or whatever.
I was thinking maybe him running off to more of an isolated type place where he's free of anybody, accessing his system while he kind of regroups and figures out what the next best step is. Because I guess he also, other than the information he was given, doesn't know much about the world and hasn't maybe fully processed the threats out there. So I don't know. I just viewed him as going off to more of an isolated place, at least for a period of time.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Kind of what Wanda's doing and
yeah,
the Hulk approach before her.
A little bit.
I'm a little too dangerous. I'm gonna peace out for a bit.
Pretty much, yeah. There you go with those echoes again.
Yeah.
We have Caleb here with a super chat. So Haleigh, every time Caleb drops in a super chat, I bring up football.
Oh.
How do you feel about football? Tell me your favorite football team.
Whatever yours is. I don't know anything about football. I'm so sorry. I'm the worst.
Which is a difficult question right now. Yeah. So very, very briefly, not to take away from WandaVision right now, very briefly, my quarterback through fantasy football is Deshaun Watson. He was the quarterback for the Texans. He is now up for trade and could go elsewhere. So my heart wants him to go to a New York team. So I finally have a reason to root for a New York team. But I feel like at this point that's seeming less and less likely. So it'll be a TBD until I can, tell you what my team is. Wherever Deshaun Watson goes, that's my team, and that's who you root for.
Okay, I root for whatever helps Perri win fantasy football.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. What else do we need to hit? And if anybody out there wants to chime in with specific questions you want us to discuss, now would be the good time. I was trying, there were so many, and you guys are having such a great conversation in the mix here, but it was hard to keep up with it all. If you have any specific questions, though, drop them in and we'll try to get to a few of them.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do a live show with y'all, so ask us things. I did want to talk about, before I forget, the idea or how they explored kind of finally and answered that, yes, it was Wanda mind controlling these people. Yes, it was traumatic and horrific. Yes, she was keeping the kids locked up. And I guess my thought is, so, especially after Spider-Man Far From Home, I think it would be really interesting if there was a future for those characters as like now being somewhat anti-heroes or anti-Scarlet Witch in the way that sort of played out in Far From Home. And they're really good actors, so it would make sense to bring them back.
You also know what that reminds me of? How people respond to mutants.
Immediately,
like that one scene where all of them were lifted from Wanda's control and they were kind of swarming her. For whatever reason, that visual brought me right back to the Fox X-Men franchise and what's happened with society in that. So if that situation is a nod of what could be to come for the mutants in the MCU, I think that was an interesting way to go about it, and I enjoyed thinking about that.
I thought the Dottie, or I guess her name is Sarah, moment where she was like, if you like that storyline, was like so effectively horrifying and heartbreaking.
That was
moments of horror to me.
That I was going to say that felt like one of the best horror scenes to me.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, what do we have here? We've got a question from Redeem K. I hope I pronounced your name right. Do you think we'll see Billy, Tommy, and Agatha in Multiverse of Madness?
I think it's definitely a possibility, and that if it's not Wanda going to the Sorcerer Supreme for help, it might be the Sorcerer Supreme going to Wanda for mucking about with the multiverse.
I'm going to guess that we see with our own eyes on screen Billy and Tommy. I think they are going to return. I don't know how big their roles would be, but I think that's going to be the focus of what Wanda is doing in that movie. As for Agatha, that feels more like the kind of situation where she'll pop up later on.
My guess is
her going back so quickly.
My guess would be going back to Agatha if, let's say, things don't go so well with her and Doctor Strange. That's my guess.
Like if she ends Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in a negative place, then she'll go to Agatha.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm rooting for her to go to end the movie in a negative place.
Well, she's gonna destroy the world. So you're likely gonna get what you want.
Why? All right, we're going back to Blackhawk for this one. Do the people in the Hex have mutant powers or no? I think the answer to that would be no, because I think you needed to walk through the Hex in order to gain those powers.
That's my take too. I had thought that would be a really interesting way to make the mutant thing happen, especially given what you were just talking about, that sense of like otherness. If those people just suddenly became the other, but I think you're right. It's just Monica.
That would have been really interesting. I was also thinking at one point, and I knew this was less likely, I was wondering if Monica's powers would have faded away with the Hex in that world. But I guess if the Hex changed her composition as she went through, then it's not necessarily something that was created within that realm like Vision and the kids. It was something that happened to her body by coming into contact with something that actually existed.
Yeah, and similarly, because I know some people have been like, how is Agatha still under a spell if she took away the Hex? My read on that was that she put a direct new spell on Agatha, and that it doesn't matter what happens to the Hex. Like, that spell's on Agatha independently.
All right. This is probably a good one for you, Haleigh, because I think you know more about this than I do. Luke Nelson is asking, would you want to see Wanda evolve into an Avengers-level threat that a team of heroes must deal with a la House of M?
I would. Yeah, I would. I think that a lot of us thought that was what we were going to get with this, and they hinted at it, and as always, the MCU reinvents the material, but like that shot of Vision and the kids, sort of floating away is very evocative of the House of M art. They definitely were playing with those themes. Yeah, I would. As much as I love the character and I only want to see her be happy, I also know that that's not the character. And I think that some of the most interesting stuff is when she is this interdimensional, so powerful force that the entirety of the Avengers has to try to stop her.
But I just want her to live happily ever after. I'm sorry.
But you don't, because if she did, then she wouldn't be in the movies anymore.
That's true. All right. I'll change my opinion now. All right. So this one from Andrew made me laugh at first. Where will Agnes live? She doesn't have a house. This was another thing that I did appreciate, is that Westview not looking so pretty and nice reflected what happened to the world, and the fact that a significant amount of the population had disappeared, and that is the logical thing to happen without, a significant amount of, I don't know, the workforce, keeping businesses up and running, people being able to go out and, buy things from stores. So I think the whole look of that town, once that clicked, meant a little more to me. But
I can't believe I didn't think about that. Oh my God, I feel so stupid.
there's that, but also, yeah, like, was there a house next door to Wanda's plot of property?
I don't remember exactly. Maybe she just has to live with Ralph Boner now forever.
Oh God. I mean,
Boner.
That probably is what's going to happen. Maybe Evan Peters will return as Ralph Boner.
Yeah.
I'm just going to as many times as I possibly can now.
Maybe Ralph Boner is the Nexus being. Who knows?
Yeah, Lionel thinks she's off to live with Ralph.
But poor Ralph, that's not fair to him, although it doesn't seem Wanda's particularly interested in what's fair to other people. So.
That is a good point. Sorry, not Rick Samoris. I don't know why I clicked that by accident, but I guess this is it. We've hit the end of WandaVision. Just before we close this out, how are you feeling now about Falcon and Winter Soldier? Because by having WandaVision come out first and be so unique, it could set certain expectations, and I imagine that the material we'll get in Falcon and Winter Soldier is going to be drastically different.
Sure. So I'm not worried about that in particular. I've always had room in my heart for the Earthbound stories, a la Captain America and the Wild Out There, and from Thor to Guardians. I love all that. But yeah, it's going to be a very different show. My expectation is that most people are going in knowing that, though. Like, we are, I think in general, MCU fans are fans of both the Earthbound and the cosmic stories. I did see 2 scenes from it for TCA, and they were very short. Like, I didn't tweet about it or anything because it wasn't enough to form any opinions, but to just talk sort of informally about it. They are very Earthbound scenes, very much about being a soldier, the cost of violence, doing violence, that kind of thing. The first one was a very violent scene of Falcon in action, and then the second was a therapy scene with Bucky where he's processing all the horrible things he did. So what I got from those sort of side by side is that this show is really invested in the act of being a soldier and what that means, how much, it's obviously different for Bucky because he was mind washed into being a horrific mass murderer for most of his life.
Wow, the way you describe it actually makes me more excited about it.
And again, I've seen so little that I don't want to make promises that aren't there, but that was my takeaway. That's the angle they're bringing by exploring those 2 characters.
Do we know how long those episodes are going to be, and episode count and stuff?
I don't want to be wrong, but I think it's less episodes that are a bit longer.
Okay. Which might be the way to go. It's just, I feel like I have a lot of these questions because it's the readjustment. And, I think a lot of the concerns about those readjustments come from the fact that this is only our first Disney Plus MCU series. So I'm first adjusting to that. I like what I got in that, and I'm being a little sensitive about that changing, but I'm open to it changing because the MCU itself has already proved that I can handle 2 completely different things within that same film franchise. So I feel like it might be a little bit of an adjustment, but I don't know. It's sounding like they have the layers to that story to well support it.
Also, Perri, I know that we're both excited for one very important reason. Wyatt Russell. Why freaking Russell?
Wyatt Russell is just the best in everything.
Absolutely.
Wyatt Russell deserves way more credit than he actually gets.
Yes. I'm so
right. That's fair. All concerns out the window. Wyatt Russell has swooped in to save the day, and I couldn't be any more pumped for Falcon Winter Soldier. And then Loki.
Oh, I am there's no qualifiers on me being extremely out of my mind excited for Loki.
See, I think this is what Guardians of the Galaxy has done to me because, yes, it is still my favorite movie in the MCU. I don't care what anyone says. It's my favorite, and that's what I'm choosing. But that's what that movie did to me, is I think it proved to me that I'm more into the cosmic MCU than I am the Earthbound one. Not that I don't appreciate the Earthbound elements, but if I were to choose what to watch, I would pick cosmic.
I usually would. I just, in general, you know me, I like weird things. Like, let's get weird with it. Absolutely, I'll choose that option. The one with the freak flag, please.
Yes.
But also, you know that I love action, so the Earthbound movies have always delivered that for me in a more specific. And not that, you know, Guardians has action, but Winter Soldier isn't.
It's different. It's a very different kind of action. All right. Time to close this baby out right now. A big thanks to all of you for joining us for the conversation, for everybody who asked questions. Haleigh, before we tune out, where can everyone find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Haleigh Foutch and on Instagram at HaystackMcGroovy.
And I don't need to plug anything because I live in this little box right here. This is my home, and you guys are all welcome to my home. So I'm happy you're here, Haleigh. I'm happy everybody out there is enjoying the conversation, and we'll be back with more. Stay tuned, follow us on the socials, and we'll keep you posted because, like I said at the beginning of this, we're not going to stop talking movies and TV shows together. So you can bet that you will see more somewhere. We'll keep you posted. That was very